which is good. It is time to begin our Bible study. It's good to see each one. Got a few announcements to be mindful of. I understand some heavy rains are supposed to move in later today and overnight, and so everyone be on guard for that. And then hopefully there won't be no tornadoes and things, and so it's supposed to be some pretty strong storms coming through. On the announcements, we need to remember the different ones that are sick. Robert, my brother, he's back in the hospital again. He's continuing to have different issues, a lot of swelling, and he had been losing some blood. Hopefully they've got that under control now, but he is extremely large from the swelling and the fluids that's built up, and so they're trying to get some of that off. So continue to remember him. Of course, Carolyn, she has her own issues going on as well. Of course, Hattie Fields, remember that individual. And Michael Lawfren has passed away as a friend of Kimberly's. Remember that family, and also the other one there, Shannon, is doing better, so remember her as well. But Michael has passed away. A lot of other different ones listed in the bulletin here. Continue to remember these different folks. We'll be celebrating the April birthdays tonight after the evening service, and so hopefully everyone can stay for that. Ladies' card signing at 5:30, and the gospel meeting at Hartley Bridge starts next Sunday with Victor Eskew. And doing all I can do is the theme. So that'll be starting next Sunday, the 13th through 16th. So that'll be starting a week from now. So get a chance, I'm sure many will attend that over there. Any other announcements as we get started? Well, we hadn't got anything on it, but I went back and looked at the notes because I'd been saying the 16th through 22nd. And I went back and looked on what I had written down on the that last meeting, and that's what I wrote down. So I don't know if he said it or if I wrote it down wrong, but I guess we'll find out for sure Tuesday when it will be, as we have a leadership meeting on Tuesday. But that is the following week, and David Decker's supposed to be speaking at that. Yes. Oh, good. Good. And that reminds me, you remember a few years back a young lady was here, Johanna. Y'all remember her? She worked at that expensive pocketbook store, Couches, and she left here and went to South Carolina. Of course, she got married while she was here down there at the Hay House. But I heard from her the other day, the first time in several years, and she said, tell everyone hello, and that she thinks about North Macon a lot. She's down in Florida now. But that reminded me of that. But it's been a couple months or so. So not since football season's over with. I really haven't heard from him. But last time I talked to him, he was doing well. And so we are going to have several that are out of town today. We know the Kimes are out of town. We also know that Reggie and them's going to be gone. Not sure who else might not be here today, but hopefully we'll still have a good turnout and a good number present this morning. Andrew, would you lead us in a word of prayer as we start, please?
Bow with me, please. Our Father who art in heaven, we come to you rejoicing this morning. Thank you for this day we've made. Thank you, Lord, for life, health, and strength. Thank you for keeping us in your care this past week up to this present time. We pray that you will be with us as we go into this lesson this morning. Thank you, Heavenly Father, for making the preparation for us to get a word and share the word and make us understand the word, that our life will be enriched, that we can be more of what you want us to be, Heavenly Father. Father, I pray for all the ones that are going through sickness, trials, tribulations. I ask you to bless them, Heavenly Father, bless them to see that they stand in need of, that they might gain in health, Heavenly Father. Then, Father, bless us. Forgive us of our all shortcomings this past week, that we may be what you would have us be. Everything will be pleasing to you this morning. Be with us now. We go into this lesson. This is our prayer in the Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you. We are looking at the book of Job, somewhat of a survey, and looking at the trials and the challenges that Job has faced and is facing. And today we're going to be looking at chapters 18 through 21. In chapter 18, it's going to be Bildad, his second speech, if you will. And we're going to find as we look at, we start with that one, then later on we'll get into Zophar's speech. But we'll consider Bildad's speech. It's really a lot of the same type of stuff that they had in the first one. So in a lot of respects, a lot of this has not changed. But in chapter 18, verses 1 through 4, he really is not cutting any slack to Job. In verses 1 through 4 of 18, then answered Bildad the Shuhite and said, how long will it be ere you make an end of words? Mark, and afterwards we will speak. Wherefore we are counted as beasts and reputed vile in your sight. He teareth himself in his anger. Shall the earth be forsaken for thee, and shall the rock be removed out of his place? Well, in these first 4 verses, what he's simply doing is he is really rebuking Job, and he's telling Job, how long are you going to continue to talk like you're talking? Yeah. And cut out that nonsense. Quit. And these are our words here. Cut out that nonsense. Is basically what he's saying. So Job, you've done something. Go ahead and own up to what you've done. And so he's rebuking Job here, and he's Job, whenever this is my words, Job, when you come to your senses, we'll continue this discussion. Pretty much what he's saying here. And so, yeah. Yeah. And that kind of sums it up. It really does. And so, they've gone now in the second time around in their speeches, and they're not cutting Job any slack. Say, you've done something. Own up to it. Cut out the nonsense. Let's when you come to your senses, we'll talk. And kind of sums it up there what he was talking about. And so Job, he begins to, in the next several verses, he describes the problems and so forth that are occurring. And the destruction of the wicked is contained in these verses here. In verse 5, for example, it says, "Yea, the light of the wicked shall be put out, and the spark of his fire shall not shine." So talking about the destruction of the wicked. And all these next several verses are going to be dealing with that, the destruction of the wicked. And in doing so, he's making these accusations. And in many respects, he's accusing Job of being guilty of a lot of this same stuff. Job, you've done something. So it kind of goes on with that concept. You've done something there. And then in verse 21, he said, "Surely such are the dwelling of the wicked, and this is the place of him that knoweth not God." So chapter 18, pretty well, he makes these accusations against Job. Job, you've done something, come to your senses type thing we talked about. The next number of verses there are talking about the destruction of the wicked. And then in the last verse, he says, "Surely such are the dwelling of the wicked, and this is the place of him that knoweth not God." So, that in verse 21, that's his, affirmation, if you will, that, this is the wicked, and then it's not the dwelling place of God. And in a lot of respects, he's saying, Job, you're right here with them. And because the accusation he's making against Job. And so that's kind of his approach in chapter 18. But then he gets into chapter 19. That's when we're going to see Job's response. And that's going to be somewhat the interesting part of this. If someone attacks you, makes accusations against you, maybe they're accurate, maybe they're not. Many times, what would be our response to that individual? Defense. That's exactly right. Defense. And many times, with defense, in defending ourselves, we may or may not be very tactful. Yeah, reactive, that's right. Again, everybody's different. That's how we might react to it. But we may not be very tactful. Many times, someone says something, it goes against our grain, we get upset with that person, and our mouth goes into gear before our thoughts do. Has that ever happened to any of you? Not me. Yeah, I'm guilty too. That's true. That's a very good point. That's exactly right. And in that same line of thought there, typically speaking, we've heard this over and over the years, the people we are the closest to, our wives or maybe even our children, they oftentimes take the brunt of our frustration. And they're really and truly the ones who shouldn't take it. But many times it's that way. And yeah, that's right. But Job, he's going to respond here in chapter 19 in the first 5 verses. And as he responds, notice his answer. how long will you vex my soul and break me in pieces with words? How long are you going to carry on this conversation and make these accusations and tear me down? Yeah, how long are you going to do that? These 10 times have you reproached me. You are not ashamed that you make yourself strange to me. No, this ain't the first time you've done it. This is 10 times that you've made these accusations. So Job's giving it back to him. And be it indeed that I have erred, mine error remaineth within myself. Now, whatever I've done, that's on me. If indeed you will magnify yourselves against me and plead against my reproach, know now that God hath overthrown me and hath compassed me with his net. So, in these first 5 verses, Job's coming back at him. And understandable. You know, he's making these accusations. He really don't know what he's talking about. And accusing Job, as we were just talking a while ago. And now he's saying, Job, you know you're guilty. And Job's response is, you don't know what you're talking about. And Job comes back at them and he responds. And Bildad's harsh on him, but Job's just as harsh coming back at him. And justifiably so. This is not a pleasant meeting between the two here. And so there's a lot of frustration. And but Job, as we see in chapter 19, his next response is going to be as he considers his thoughts about God. It begins in verse 6. Know now that God hath overthrown me and hath compassed me with his net. Behold, I cry out of wrong, but I am not heard. I cry aloud, and there is no judgment. Verse 7, he's saying a lot of what he said before. I cry out of wrong, but I'm not hitting it. God's not hearing me. And then there's no judgment. He has fenced up my way that I cannot pass, and hath set darkness in my paths. And what is he saying there in verse 8? I wonder where that was coming from. Okay. Yeah. That right there is pretty much what he's saying. He's blocked my way. And in verse 9 he says, he has stripped me of my glory and has taken the crown from my head. Is he making accusations against God, or what's he doing here? Okay. Yeah, God's in control. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's giving his perspective on it. That's exactly right. And God's in control. Job knows that. And no doubt he's wondering within his mind, why? And he's not getting the answers. Yeah, why? Yeah. And that's one of them little words that me, you, and Jimmy were talking about before class this morning. If, but, why? Why? How many times have we asked that question, why? A toddler, 2-3-year-old child, over and over, in their curiosity age, they'll ask, why? And sometimes parents or whoever they're around, they get tired of hearing, why? But they're inquisitive. Job is asking why, and he's not getting an answer. And so that is, a little somewhat disturbing and frustrating to him. So, in these next group of verses here, he's wondering why. In verse 10, it says, He hath destroyed me on every side, and I am gone, and my hope has removed like a tree. So this is his perspective. This is how he's seeing things. All of this has happened. I've suffered. I have no hope now. I'm frustration. So all of this is involved. He hath also kindled his wrath against me, and he counteth me unto him as one of his enemies. Now, that's a strong statement right there in verse 11. He's saying that God counts him as one of his enemies. Now, why would he make a statement such as that? Yeah. That's it. He's lost everything. His family members, his possessions, his friends are against him. Nothing is going right for him. And he's frustrated. And he's saying, God has allowed this to happen. But why? And as if I'm one of his enemies. Yeah, right. Yeah, God, yeah, that's exactly right. God is doing this. That's better than allowed. You're right. And God's doing this. And why? Yeah, and that's we if it were us, we might be asking the same question. Why? And but he's not getting the answer, so he don't understand. And so, as we see here in verse 11, he talks about, he counts me as one of his enemies. Well, obviously that's not the case, but that's how he sees us. His troops come together and raise up their way against me, and encamp round about my tabernacle. So, in verse 12, these verses here up through 12, he's saying, all of this has happened. I don't know why. Where's the justice in all of this? God is doing this. Just don't know why. And again, we can probably to some degree understand some of the frustration. If we were in that situation, I honestly don't know how I would react. And I couldn't even begin to say how I would react. Would I act like Job? Would I start blaming God? Would I turn my back on God? I don't know how I would react. But one thing we do know, he's questioning and wondering why, but at the same time, he does not make false accusations against God. And so he's He is concerned about it, of course. And then in the next few verses, he begins to plead, if you will. He cries out and says, "Have pity upon me. Have pity upon me. O ye my friends, for the hand of God hath touched me." Now, my friends, y'all need to have pity on me. Consider where I am. Consider what I'm going through. So his frustration is building. Is in, they have talked like they've talked to him and so forth. So he said, "Have pity upon me, have pity upon me, O my friends, for the hand of God hath touched me. Why do you persecute me as God and are not satisfied with my flesh?" All right, see now right here in verse 22, he says God has persecuted him. That's what you were talking about a while ago. And then God has persecuted me. But why? You are my friends. Why are you persecuting me? In times of distress, in times of troubles, depending on whatever the situation might be, oftentimes we think, well, what about our family? And sometimes our families are good support, sometimes they're not. But a true friend is going to be there with you. And they're going to try to help you and try to encourage you. His friends are making accusations. They're not giving him any encouragement. And he's saying, why, you're my friends. Why are you persecuting me? Why are you doing this? And so, we can sense and see his frustration here as he deals with them. Oh, that my words were not written. Oh, that they were printed in a book. That they were graven with an iron pen and laid in the rock forever. So he responds to the situations here. And in the latter verses here, he's confident of that everything's going to come through okay. It's, that my words were not written in a book, or that they were printed in a book. Wish they were inscribed somewhere. But now, notice verse 25. Did this verse sound familiar for any reason? For I know that my Redeemer liveth, and that he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth. Any significance in that verse right there for us? There you go. There you go. I knew Anthony would come through. It's a song that Jimmy and Reggie sometimes lead that song. I know that my Redeemer lives. And then, of course, you know how the song goes. I know. Yeah. So when I read that verse, that song came to my mind. That's a song that we sing. A good song, a lot to it. And so in verse 25, he is saying, I know that my Redeemer liveth. That is a powerful statement that Job is making. He has not lost his confidence in God. He's confused, he don't understand, but he knows that his Redeemer lives. And though after my skin worms destroy this body, yet in my flesh shall I see God. With everything that's going on, he still has confidence in God. Even though he said God has done this. Do you suppose that maybe in his thinking that this has happened? I don't know the reason, but for whatever the reason, God has allowed this to happen, has done this, and there's got to be a reason behind it. Perhaps that's his thinking. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we're seeing evidence of that as we're reading these verses right here. And there's a powerful lesson for us. When things are not going well for us, as they sometimes do, don't depend on ourselves, depend on God. God's going to be there for us. He's going to bring us through. Yeah, he's asking why, but he's not getting answers. But he's not giving up on God. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but now who made that statement? His wife. His wife told him to curse God and die. But as has been mentioned before, when we consider she was going through a lot too, because the things that affected him affected her. So that was a good point that was brought up. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And then in chapter 20, you got Zophar's speech. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's exactly right. Worry about yourself. And so many times in life, it happens that way, that people come so involved, if you will, in other people's business that they don't see their own situation. No. It's easy for me to look at each of you and say, well, this is what you're doing. But am I doing the same thing? Am I guilty of the same thing? You know, take care of your own affairs. Make sure your situation is taken care of before you start pointing fingers at others. And so that's a good summation there. But he gets into chapter 20. First 11 verses of chapter 20 is basically talking about the wicked, how that, in the long run, they're not going to be successful. The prosperity, if you will, of the wicked and so forth is going to be short-lived. And then the verses 12 through 28 of Zophar's speech, he's saying that the wicked, they're going to be cut off. They're going to be done away. So he's lashing out on the wickedness and talking about they're going to be done away. And then in verse 29 of chapter 20, this is a portion of a wicked man from God, and the heritage appointed unto him by God. So, verse 29 is confident of the judgment of the wicked. And again, they're not having any mercy on Job. And then in 21, Job is saying in the first 16 verses that the triumph of the wicked is not short. The wicked are prospering, if you will. Then he says, verses 20, 21, 16, notice what it said. Lo, their good is not in their hand. The counsel of the wicked is far from me. Their good is not in their hand. The counsel of the wicked is far from me. Job said, no, they've done all this and it says in verse 13, they spend their days in wealth and in a moment go down to the grave. Therefore they say unto God, depart from us, for we desire not the knowledge of their ways. So he's making all these different statements. Job says, I don't relish where they are. I don't want no part of that. I don't envy them. And he says that their wickedness in the next few verses is rarely cut off. Then in the end of it, in verses 27 through 34, he says, behold, I know your thoughts and the devices which you wrongfully imagine against me. For you say, where is the house of the prince, and where are the dwelling places of the wicked? Have you not asked them that go by the way, and do you not know their tokens? That the wicked is reserved to the day of destruction. They shall be brought forth to the day of wrath. Who shall declare his way to his face, and who shall repay him what he hath done? Yet shall he be brought to the grave, he shall remain in the tomb. The clods of the valley shall be sweet unto him, and every man shall draw after him, as there are innumerable before him. How then comfort you me in vain, seeing in your answers there remaineth falsehood? So he concludes chapter 21 by basically saying, all of these accusations, all of these things that you're saying are false. Falsehoods. You don't know what you're talking about. Kind of sums up what he's saying there. Absolutely. No compassion. And that's evident in the things they're saying. So no compassion whatsoever. So as we looked at these 4 chapters, it's kind of brief summary of these 4 chapters. And but it kind of that gives us some detail of their thought process, his response to them, and we see the attitude that they have up to this point. All right, we will stop there and we'll pick up in a few moments.